Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon, Department of English, VSSG College, Kanpur. We are dealing with paper 13th, Linguistics. In this, module number 6, Mechanism of Speech Production has been written by Dr. Namrata Rathore Mahanta from Department of English, Mahila Mahavidyalaya, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. In this module, speech is such a common aspect of human existence that its complexity is often overlooked in day-to-day life. Speech is the result of many interlinked, intricate processes that need to be performed with precision. Speech production is an area of interest not only for language learners, language teachers and linguists, but also people working in varied domains of knowledge. We know that speech and language, they are different. Now when we say speech, we know that it can be spoken and it can be heard. But when we say language, we are very much aware that it can be spoken and heard, but also it can be written, it can be read, it can be thought, it can be expressed in non-verbal, non-orthographic forms. I am just talking to you and you can understand that if I say, you understand that I am saying stop. I haven't said a word, but the way you decoded it, it is also in a language. In everyday parlance, the term speech and language are often used as synonyms. However, in academic use, these two terms refer to very different things. We have a certain way of looking or nodding, that is also language. Speech and language are interconnected. Speech is the process of putting language in verbal form. And language is a complex system of reception and expression of thoughts and ideas in verbal, non-verbal and written forms. You can see that in this particular diagram on your screen, the middle one we have a speech which is just covered with a particular language. So language is everywhere and speech is just a central position, having a central position, and it is part of it. We can define a speech as the sound produced by any individual during verbal communication. Language, on the other hand, is a complex system that operates between an idea or a thought and its meaning. Another comparison may be done that speech is a physiological activity. Language is a cognitive activity. Speech is concerned with the brain and body organs. We need this mouth movement to speak. We need our tongue movement to speak, lip movement to speak. So we need these body organs. We need brain to think. Language is concerned with the mind and society and the community. Which particular language I am thinking in, that also depends upon the society in which I am living in. Problematizing speech and language. We have biology, we have society, but with the individual. Over the years, linguists have engaged themselves with the way in which speech and language exist within the human beings. They have examined the processes by which language is acquired and learned. The role of the individual human being, the role of the society, the role of the community, the genetic or physiological attributes of the human beings, all being investigated from time to time. Whenever we talk about linguistics, we cannot just ignore the father of the linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure. He has given us concept and these two words, langue and parole. Now we see that Ferdinand de Saussure, a Swiss linguist and the impetus behind the rise of the structuralism, declared that language is imbibed by the individual in a society or community. His lectures given at the University of Geneva from 1906 to 1911 were collected and published in 1916 as Course in General Linguistics. Saussure described language using terms such as langue and parole. Now, what is this? What are these two terms? Let us define them. Langue is the act of understanding and communicating. Parole is the art of speaking. Langue is an attribute of a group or a community. Parole is an act of the individual. So these are two basic differences. Another very important linguist to discuss is Noam Chomsky. He has given another two terms, competence and performance, in relation with the language. Now, Noam Chomsky, an American linguist who focused on the human mind as the innate source of language, declared that humans are born with mind that is pre-programmed for language. This is something very important to understand. Human mind, when a child takes birth, he has his mind, and according to Chomsky, that is pre-programmed for acquiring any language for that matter. He gave the concepts of language competence and language performance. These are two very important terms. Language competence and language performance. What are the differences between these two terms? Chomsky discovered that humans are biologically programmed to use languages. And this is what he called inherent human ability or innate language. Now, as far as competence and performance is concerned, when he just declared and admitted that humans are biologically programmed to use language, then he said competence. What is this competence? That the innate knowledge of the language. Yes, I have got those faculty, I have got that vocal cord, I have got those lips and other organs to speak. So that is the competence. I am competent enough to speak. And then the performance, that is actual use of language. How well I do it, in what manner I do it. So that is the performance. In the present times, speech and language are seen as interdependent and complementary attributes of humans. Current research focuses on finding the inner connections between speech and language. In present times, the term speech and language is used in most application-based areas. One such major area is speech and language processing. It is used in computational linguistics, natural language processing, speech therapy, speech recognition, and many more areas. Let us also think about practical application of the mechanism of speech production. Of course, it is used for language learning, enhancing speaking skills. Robotics. Simulate speech in robots, text-to-speech function in gadgets. Then we have medical science, like design therapy modules for different speech and language disorders. Develop advanced gadgets for persons with auditory needs. Then criminology is another field, and where recognize speech patterns of individuals, identify manipulations in recorded speech patterns that you must have heard and seen in various other movies. Lie detector is being used. What is it? It is just with the aid of this particular speech pattern. Now, practical application of the mechanism of speech production, you can say that it is also done in speech processing mechanism is used in music and telecommunication in a major way. It is a function which starts in the brain moves through the biological processes of respiration, phonation and articulation to produce sounds. These sounds are received and perceived through biological and neurological processes. What comprises speech mechanism? Another question, a very normal kind of question that comes. It is something neuromotor processes. We use our eyes and ears at the same time. The brain plays a very important role in speech. Research on the human brain has led to identification of certain areas that are classically associated with speech. Injury to these areas is known to cause speech loss. The visual cortex processes visual information. The auditory cortex processes auditory information. Broca's area, identified by Paul Broca in 1861, is associated with speech production. And Larynx area, identified by Carl in 1874, is associated with retention of words and images. This diagram makes it clear all these particular areas in different way. Now let us also talk about neural networks that produce speech and language. Speech and language abilities develop as the brain is trained through life experience. While neural networks, they are established in the human brain over a course of time. You can find in this particular diagram that neural networks continue to surprise various people, and these connections do not follow the fixed path, and new networks are formed outside the conventional speech and language areas. Researchers are just carried on in this particular area, and people are coming up with more and more new findings. An understanding of the speech mechanism begins by understanding the organs used to produce speech. It is interesting to note that each of these organs has a particular life function to perform. Their presence in the human body is not for speech per se, but for other primarily bodily functions. In addition to their primary physiological functions, these organs participate in the production of speech. Hence, speech is said to be the overlaid functions of these organs. Articulatory speech mechanism. Whenever we talk about a speech mechanism, we cannot just avoid this articulatory speech mechanism. What is it? Speech production is not the primary physiological function of the articulatory organs, we know about it. And it is the overlaid function, we also know about it. Now let us know something more about articulatory speech mechanism. What is it? There are various stages of speech production. It starts with lungs and glottis, and then comes in the mouth as the part of the articulation. So you can say that they are broadly divided into these three: respiration, phonation and articulation. So lungs are the primary organs involved in the first stage, larynx is involved in the second stage, and the organs in the mouth are involved in the third stage. So these are the various three stages. The organs of speech can be classified based on their position and function. Organs involved in respiratory stage, phonatory stage and articulatory stage as discussed earlier. So you can say the lungs and the trachea. The lungs compress air and push it up the trachea. That is the respiratory organ. Then the phonatory organ consists of the larynx. The larynx contains the membrane-like structure called vocal folds, and the vocal folds can come together or move apart. They are flexible enough. Then the articulatory organs, they consist of, that you can see, lips, teeth, roof of the mouth, tongue, oral and nasal cavities. Now let us discuss all these in detail one by one. This is the respiratory stage. You can see the respiratory stage involves the movement of air. Through muscle action of the lungs, the air is compressed and pushed up to pass through the respiratory tract, trachea, then larynx, then pharynx, oral cavity, nasal cavity, or both. This is the flow chart of lung function on your screen, where Robert Mannell has explained the process of breathing in and breathing out and how it affects and what are the various one after another. That is just explained through this flow chart. A simple diagram of the vocal tract given by Robert Mannell is also to be seen, where you will come to know where the mouth cavity is there, then the nasal cavity is there, soft palate, hard palate, trachea. So all these things will make whatever I am saying more clear to you. Direction of air stream, when we talk about breathing out and breathing in, may be termed as egressive and ingressive. When we say egressive, it is used in most languages. When we say ingressive, that is used in some particular language like Sindhi. Air from the lungs passes through the larynx and pharynx, that we have already told, but this diagram on your screen just presents a comparative study of pharynx versus larynx to make you understand the mechanism of the speech production. Now phonetation. Phonetation is something that contains many more things. It may be voiceless, like vocal folds are drawn far apart. Air passes without any friction. Then we have vocal folds are drawn loosely apart and air passes making whisper-like sounds. Sounds like whispering, murmuring are created. Yes, I can understand that. Vocal folds are drawn close and vibrate with moderate tension. Air passes making a vibration, that is a vibrating sound. Then we have vocal folds are drawn close and vibrate with tension. Air passes making rough, creaky sound. Vocal folds are fully closed and no air can pass. Sounds such as the glottal stop are also created when we say that phonetation is closed. Coming back to the passage of the air stream, it needs to be noted that while the process of phonation occurs before the air stream enters the oral or nasal cavity, the quality of speech is also determined by the state of the pharynx. Any irregularity in the pharynx leads to modification in speech quality. Inside the larynx are two membrane-like structures or folds called the vocal cords. The space between these is called the glottis. The vocal folds can be moved to varied distance. 5 main positions of the vocal folds have been identified: voiceless, breathy, voiced, creaky, and vocal fry. I have repeated it so that you should understand it in a better way. It should be clear to you, and because if you want to understand the mechanism of the speech production, it is something very important to understand it twice at least. Now, what is the position of the tongue? Tongue is very important for speech mechanism. Tongue is a strong muscle that can be raised or lowered to various positions. It may be at the front or the center or the back. For maximum times, it's at the front. Then high mid 2/3 of the distance between maximum and minimum, that we can call center, and then at the back, let low mid 1/3 of the distance between maximum and minimum is taken care of. The part of the tongue and the tongue quadrilateral is shown in this figure. Lips may have 3 movements: rounded, neutral, or spread. Depends upon what we are speaking. The mouth is the major site for articulatory processes of speech production. There are active articulators that can move and take different positions. The tongue, the lips, the soft palate are the active articulators in the mouth. The vocal folds are the active articulators in the larynx. There are passive articulators as well. Those passive articulators cannot move but combine with the active articulators to produce speech. The teeth ridge or the alveolar ridge and the hard palate are the passive articulators. You can see in this diagram the upper teeth are passive articulators. So these are used in articulation of dental sounds, labiodental sounds and interdental sounds. We often call hard palate as the roof of the mouth. And roof of the mouth, when we say that hard palate is with alveolar ridge and soft palate is used as velum. Soft palate or velum lies opposite to the back of the tongue. In the raised position, it rests against the back of mouth. The nasal passage is fully blocked. Pulmonic air passes through the mouth. In the lowered position, it rests against the back of tongue. The oral passage is fully blocked and pulmonic air passes through the nose, not through the mouth. Then it is loosely lowered. The oral as well as the nasal passages are partially open and pulmonic air passes through the mouth as well as the nose. To summarize, we can say that understanding of the speech mechanism of sounds is important in the English classroom as well. You may ask why? This is a scientific study. How are we concerned with it in our English classroom? But it has been proved that to understand, to articulate and describe speech sounds accurately, you are supposed to understand its mechanism as well. In the digital world, an understanding of a speech mechanism is very important and it has led to new applications of speech synthesis. Speech mechanism is important also to describe the various sounds of the consonant if we are aware that how it is produced with the use of the tongue or with the use of the nasal cavity or the mouth cavity or which organ is being used, then definitely we are going to produce that particular sound in the correct way. So that's why speech production is important as well as its mechanism is important to understand, to do justice with the pronunciation. Thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala.